The Joe Rogan Experience.
How
Who's the surgeon? Who's the
educated
Surgeon General right now?
I don't know.
Or CDC? Is that Redfield?
I don't know.
I'm sure he's a competent physician. I also think that there's a whole thing about pretending that masks don't work. Masks don't work in the general population. Please don't buy them. Our healthcare people need them.
Is that what they're saying?
Well, that's what they've been saying, right? And so the issue is that you have some piece of nonsense. So
That is a piece of nonsense because California is now changing their recommendation and saying if you're going out in public,
it's
you
not
should
just
wear a
nonsense.
mask.
It's deadly nonsense. It's deadly physician-killing nonsense. I mean, I'm trying. Smiles, everyone.
Smile.
Yeah, I mean, what we have is a situation in which we knew that the mask and personal protective equipment supplies are wildly off, to say nothing of ventilators and ICU beds. And now, what do we do about it? So we have rules like, please don't bring masks to work because it scares the patients, or please don't wear homemade masks because they might actually be more germ-filled or virus-filled. So you're back propagating what you wish to be true to get the action that you're looking for. What we have is a prisoner's dilemma, where if everybody runs and buys up masks, like the people we need to be protected most are the heroes who are actually dealing with, multiple COVID patients and taking huge amounts of viral load. So there's no question in my mind that those are the people that as a society, if you would level with us, like there is a speech to give, which would go like this. My fellow Americans, as readiness czar, I am forced to tender my resignation effective Friday this week. I have failed to heed many of the warnings in our academic literature. Because our reserves are severely depleted, it is imperative that we not suffer further loss of life, and therefore I am forced to make an unusual request. Having failed you, I'm asking everyone who stockpiled masks for personal use to think about doing something sacrificial for the good of us all. Our heroes are currently exposed to the coronavirus and taking huge amounts of viral load, and I'm asking you to donate any unused masks that you have to this population as we are desperately trying to replenish our stocks. Please continue to shelter in place and recognize that the benefit to you is minor and the benefit to us all is major. And this will be following your heroic impulse to bring us back together as a nation.
First of all, is there a readiness czar?
No.
Okay. Second of all, no one's going to say that. They're never going to admit. They're going to say we are adjusting.
I don't care.
We're adjusting our recommendations based on the new.
No, Joe. I'm going to be completely unreasonable. Okay. I know I have this mode where I become completely unreasonable.
Go ahead.
This is if that's where we are, then it's time to revolt.
Revolt how?
I don't know.
Well, we need people.
Civil disobedience. Like to put our healthcare people. I mean, I have not been off my property for weeks. The reason I'm here, in part, is to do what little I can, and it's very little, to support the people who are our literal heroes, our life and death, putting themselves in harm's way. The idea of hospital administrators abusing our physicians and nurses makes me apoplectic with rage. The fact that these people are told that they can't talk to the press and they write to me and their family and their children write to me. My mother was asked to do this. My uncle works in a prison. He's not allowed to wear a mask. He's not allowed to bring a mask. I sent a mask, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, there's a lot of those stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong? It is time for these people to resign, and it is time for us to remember that we have the ability to turn over our own government. We are so unprepared as a nation, and we have been sold out for so long by our self-appointed leadership class who nobody wants, that we either remember who we are and how this game is played. I mean, this is a pre-war footing. And this can easily lead to war. The transmission mechanism is you have everybody stay indoors because you're worried about deaths of accountability, which is, I don't think they're worried about the number of deaths. I think they're worried about deaths that result from triage and that would result in career-ending action.
Yeah, this is what you were saying on the phone. You think that's really what's bothering them.
Yes, but if we all have to stay home while they replenish our supplies, then the economy goes into recession. Recession can become depression. Depressions lead to armed conflict, and armed conflict leads to war. That would be a transmission mechanism from these stupid masks to something that nobody can handle. And here's the thing. We are coming up on Passover. And we Jews have a tradition that I wish everybody had, which is that we read one stupid story every goddamn year just to drill it into your head to make sure it's always fresh. And this is, when it's time to leave, when it's time to change, don't wait for the bread to rise. This is what I say to every Jewish person. Like, you're sitting around waiting for the bread to rise, because they all know the story, which is you eat the goddamn matzah because the people who waited for the bread to rise are no longer with us, and their descendants are no longer with us. And it is time to revolt. This leadership class is unworkable. The reason that you and I both came to the word Tulsi instantly, I don't think you took much deliberation, is because Tulsi would know what to do.
Well, she's also the least encumbered.
Yeah.
She's the least burdened by the
everybody,
ties to
everybody
the system.
in the system hates her.
Yeah.
You know, and the whole point is she would put heads on pikes.
Yeah.
And this is the moment for heads on pikes. And it's important. It's not a vengeance thing. The importance is, what is the cost to you killing people by failing to heed the academic literature? If a supply was depleted and you didn't replenish it, what is the cost to you?
Well, there's lessons in how other countries have viewed this and how they chose to act, particularly South Korea, right? South Korea acted quicker. Mm-hmm. Smaller population than us, but a much smaller impact of the virus. They shut things down very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Singapore?
I don't know how Singapore did
very,
it.
very aggressive.
Same thing?
I think that they use surveillance and tracking and, making sure that they visited anybody who was known. I mean, they had a different system. And as people like you and me who love our civil liberties, I believe that in part, Singapore's draconian society lives off of things that only we can do due to our freedom. Mm. So you have to realize that freedom is itself an export. And one of the great dangers is that China has been exporting the benefits of freedom from the United States into an authoritarian system so that they get the benefits of both worlds. They get the benefits of our middle finger, which I think is the secret of American innovation. And they get the benefits of authoritarianism, where they can do things that we can't because they can order people to do the unconscionable. Mm. So my feeling is I'm on Team Civil Liberties, and Team Civil Liberties has to be somewhat nationalistic, more militaristic, more command and control. Like, who would you take orders from? So in a lot of fields, I'd take orders from you. You're the big dog in this space, and to the extent that you wanted to coordinate something, I would use my channel. I would subordinate to you, and I would want sometimes people to subordinate to me if I was taking a lead on something important. When we have this fear of leadership, because we're all so individualistic that we never want to take an order. Like whenever I'm training a new assistant or something, one of my always best practices is, can I get you coffee? It's very important to show that the ability to ask to serve somebody else and the ability to lead are tied. You have to be a follower to be a leader and a leader to be a follower. You shouldn't be one or the other. We need right now we need more of a war footing. We need a war president. We need war senators. We need people of this mentality because the nap is coming to an end. And I do think Nancy Pelosi needs to resign and Bill de Blasio needs to resign. I think that this administration, made some good moves and fumbled the ball. And I believe that past administrations made some good moves and fumbled the ball. And the imperative is to stop back propagating what you want us to do, like defeat a prisoner's dilemma, and come up with the lie that would cause us to act selfishly, rationally. Like if you tell me that a mask is actually more dangerous in my hands because it becomes germ-filled, then the idea is like, oh, okay, so I guess I won't use the mask. Well, yeah, because you lied to me, and the idea is that that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, what would need to be true to get you to do what I want?
I don't understand what you're saying about these masks. What are you saying?
So if I say, for example, let's imagine that I don't want to put seatbelts in cars.
Okay.
And I say, Joe, a seatbelt could trap you. Should your car go into the water off of a bridge, you could in fact die from the seatbelt because you'd become entangled and would not be able to save yourself. Right,
but the problem with that analogy is seatbelts actually do save lives.
On balance.
But is it possible that they're just acting poorly with this mask thing, but that masks actually can contain a lot of viruses and they can hold on
Seatbelts
to
can
viruses.
kill you, but do you believe that's what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to say it as a related rate problem. Let's talk about everybody who gets sick and dies from contaminated masks, everybody who gets sick and dies from a false feeling of safety. Let's just go through a huge list of every bad thing.
I see the analogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the idea is think about all the lives saved because of masks, both in terms of transmission, which I don't cough on you, I cough into the mask, or in terms of I don't breathe in either aerosolized or droplets, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now the two are real, but you're focusing on like the seatbelt deaths of entanglement because you actually have a covert agenda. And like, and you're
what do you think their covert agenda is?
Oh, I don't know exactly, but if I had to speculate, I'd go like this. One, we're terrified of triage deaths that occurred simply because we didn't have enough resources that were mandated to be stockpiled or talked about in the literature. That's one thing they're worried about.
Because there's liability.
Then there's liability, which is, we were following the Surgeon General's recommendation at the time. Now, if somebody suddenly found, like all the masks in the world, I think that the Surgeon General would suddenly say the science has become conclusive.
Because there would no longer be a worry about liability. You would just get those masks to the people.
You'd get the masks to the people who need them, and then you'd stop transmission. You'd slow transmissions by.
Don't you think there's also a lot of just figuring it out as they go along?
No.
You don't think that's a lot
this.
of what's going on with that? No?
There is figuring this out as it goes along. As regards the masks, I believe that everybody knows that masks save lives on balance. They know that the people who need them most have very weird rules. There's this whole thing about the states versus the federal government. There's this issue about price gouging and price mechanisms. There are all sorts of things stopping the mask problem from being sorted out, one of which is the number of masks that are produced in China and the fact that we may have sent masks and personal protective equipment to China. So there's a huge issue of accountability and responsibility, and that we're back propagating our response. How much are we quarantined and how much are we locked down? What are we saying about why the physicians are being told not to wear masks when they're seeing patients? I mean, I'm talking about deadly nonsense, deadly structural nonsense. And if people like you and me don't call this out using like these crazy channels that we have, then the narrative just stands. And so partially what we're doing is a parallel sense-making operation to the standard media, which is Twitter said, we will now be removing tweets if you contradict official authoritative health sources. So that's just what I did. Surgeon General's lying, CDC's lying, WHO is lying. Come at me.